This is a series we call Hot Hand Minis. These are shorter form episodes where Geoff and I get together to discuss a single topic. And hopefully it's like a more chill kind of just conversational, even though our pods are normally conversational, but we're going to be very laid back in this talk. I'm going to actually continue to drink my weird green juice that I'm drinking right now. We are here to talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder versus the New York Knicks, a huge matchup in the NBA. Actually, Oklahoma City has another huge matchup coming up really soon after that against the Boston Celtics. But we're going to kind of break down this matchup in, around 20 minutes or so. Geoff, where do you want to start with this matchup? I think it's critical for so many different reasons. Obviously, two of the top teams in each of their conferences. The Knicks have sort of had an easier schedule of late and now are playing one of the best teams and the best defense in the entire league. And Oklahoma City is coming off of a game, just having played last night. It's going to be a back-to-back for them. And if the Knicks are going to beat them, this is probably going to be the time to do it. So curious what you're thinking as far as like breaking down this matchup. What sticks out to you?
What sticks out to me is there's this old saying, styles make fights. And I think what makes this specific matchup so interesting is these two teams are almost, we talk about synergy a lot. The matchup synergy is really high. And I think this is going to just end up being a really, really high quality basketball game because you have this team in the Oklahoma City Thunder that is one of the best defenses we've seen in recent memory. And they do so much well on the defensive side of the ball. They do enough well on offense. We're going to talk about their offense later. I think I'm overall a little bit more skeptical in their offense than you are, but they definitely, whether I'm high enough on their offense or not, they do enough offense to be a great team regardless. And then on the other side of the ball, you have this team in the Knicks that is playing outstanding offensive basketball. Their defense, sometimes their defense can be good in stretches. Sometimes it can be not good. If Oklahoma City's offense was ever going to, put up big numbers and have a great, I think, against another really good team, I think it's going to be against a team like this. We've seen their offense be really good in stretches. The last two games specifically against the Clippers and Timberwolves, they've gotten off to slow starts and then just completely just went nuts in the third quarter of both games. But I do think both of those offensive stretches where, make no mistake, they were putting up lots of points, it was built upon their defense. And I think that's where I want to start. From the Knicks perspective, you have to make sure that the Thunder are not doing what they do best on the defensive side of the ball, and that's forcing a lot of turnovers, getting out into transition, getting a lot of early offense. And so I think the Knicks are kind of uniquely equipped to do that because oftentimes these great offenses, there's a pretty heavy correlation between great offenses and not being a super low turnover team. It's rare to have a great offense that's extremely low turnover because usually to create great offense, it takes a lot of ball movement. But the Knicks are the exception to that rule. They don't turn it over. So if you watch a Thunder game, they play small a lot. The way they mitigate their size disadvantage is by swarming the back end and jumping these entry passes. The Knicks don't really do that. They don't throw entry passes over the top. I think Tom Thibodeau might have you banished from the stadium if you tried throwing a lob pass over an entry lob pass over the top of a defender with Alex Caruso waiting on the back line to steal it. You're not going to see that super often. They toss the ball around the perimeter. They pretty much only move the ball from point A to point B if there's a clear advantage. So I don't know. Like I do think I'm not doubting the Thunder defense. I do like the Knicks offense against this defense relatively because even though the Thunder have just a countless slew of guys they can throw specifically at Jalen Brunson, I just don't think they're going to do the thing that they do best, and that's turn the Knicks over a ton. And I think that's gonna I think that's gonna play to the Knicks' advantage in this matchup.
Yeah, I think that's well thought through, well said. I'm glad you have this perspective because, I obviously you watch more basketball than anyone I know, honestly, and probably are one of the biggest basketball watchers in the world at this point. Like, I know that sounds crazy, but I believe that to be the case. I've watched every OKC basketball game this season. Like I specifically like honing in on a few teams, and I watch around the league, not as much as you, but with OKC, this is a team I like study. And I think to me, I think that people, I've talked about this on other pods at this point, but people think about OKC as like they generate turnovers, they're disruptive, all of those kinds of things. And that is definitely true. That is like what they do. They generate turnovers. They get deflections. That is what they do. But the way they do it, I don't think there's a team that's like immune to it. And what I mean by that is I think that the way they do it is really by being comfortable in rotation. Like OKC does not care about being put in rotation. They welcome it. It's almost like they start their possession like ready to be in rotation. And to me, we talked about this before. Something I really don't like in general as a general principle for defense is double teaming, is blitzing, is playing super aggressive coverages, because I'm always like, well, that just creates a 4-on-3 in the back end. You're handing your opponent an advantage to take advantage of. As opposed to making them work to create their own advantage. You're just saying, here's an advantage, take it. OKC does that, but because they're so happy to be in rotation and they have ridiculous recovery speed, ridiculous length at the wings, and the intelligence of where they need to be on the defensive side of the ball, they don't get hurt from playing super aggressive coverages. So in a lot of cases, what you'll see is with a ball handler or a primary initiator, they will play super aggressive coverage with that player to get the ball out of their hands and don't pay a penalty for it like you would normally. I mean, we talked about so many times, when the Knicks played the Sacramento Kings last year, and they were playing this ridiculous coverage where they're blitzing pick and rolls with Brunson. Sabonis or whoever the guy is defending the pick and roll is like coming so high, almost out to the half court line. And then, Brunson will just dump off to Josh Hart in the short roll. And then it's a 4-on-3 with Josh Hart, and he was just crushing them. And to me, I was just like, why would any team play defense this way? This is ridiculous. Like, you're just handing an advantage over. However, the Oklahoma City Thunder do play defense this way especially when they have their 5 guards and wings lineups. But somehow they're able to recover and get back in front and actually disrupt and cause steals out of this. They turn this disadvantage into an advantageous situation that allows them to generate turnovers. They put you in situations where you have to make passes or shots, and there's one option or the other, and they're able to continue to get in passing lanes and cause havoc that way. So it's almost like the way their defense is structured in a lot of cases, it's not like they're taking advantage of other teams that are trying to generate ball movement, but they're creating a scenario where your team needs to create ball movement, and then they take advantage of it, if that makes sense. So to me, I feel like there's almost no team that's like immune to what Oklahoma City does. And it'll be really interesting to see if the Knicks, who, like you said, are a low ball movement team, low turnover team, if they're able to deal with what Oklahoma City does and the positions that they put you in with their pressure and their blitzing and their all kinds of pressure that they apply in their coverages.
What about a team that is going to not disallow, but heavily disincentivize you from going small by having one of the most skilled big men in the history of the NBA that'll just punish small lineups by shooting over their small players or getting into the paint relentlessly and forcing the Thunder to play Isaiah Hartenstein more, which is the first domino that stops the turnover train, the Thunder from having that super aggressive, elite rotating 5 small guy lineup.
I don't think you can force OKC out of their small lineup in most cases. And I don't think Towns is going to be the person to be able to do it, to be honest. And I say that because, how they typically deal with, a big against their 5 smalls lineup is that they just trap and double team in the post. And they are so good at their rotations that when you kind of swing it out to the open guy, obviously the first defender rotates, the second perimeter defender rotates, and it goes around the key, around the horn. And then when it hits the person in the corner, typically the guy who doubled in the post is able to sprint back out and get out to that player. And one reason that I noticed that they're able to do this so well is because that player can run super hard and not have to worry about kind of stutter stepping into a closeout. They can aggressively close out because if that player blows by, they'll simply just peel switch or have some other kind of switching scheme where they will just hand that guy off to another player and then rotate. So I think, again, in my opinion, if you look at the Thunder defense from the perspective of not about disruption and about turnovers, but about rotations, about being able to be comfortable in rotations and being able to make every rotation based on how they switch and what their game plan is. If you look at them in that paradigm, I think that their defense just makes a lot more sense in terms of what they want to do. So in my opinion, that's the reason why teams really haven't been able to punish them enough when they go small so that they're not successful. And I do think the Knicks will have success. I don't think the Knicks are going to get destroyed like how some other teams do, just because the Knicks have so much talent and it's such a ridiculous shot making team. The Knicks are going to make difficult shots. That's going to happen. But I don't think it'll be easy. And I think it's going to be a big test.
Big test indeed. Big test for both teams. And I think it's going to go that way on the other side because the Knicks, as I alluded to earlier, their defense has been better as of late. They're actually an above average defensive team overall at this point. I think they're 13th in defensive rating on the season, which is better than you or I projected them. We both assumed they would be closer to league average, maybe below league average, with the offense carrying the day. This is a different test, especially against those small lineups. It'll be very interesting to see how much Thibodeau leans on Towns if, he pushes 40 minutes and what he does in the non-Towns minutes, because I'm not sure. I know that Precious Achiuwa is a switchable defender, but the Thunder go really small, really small. And it's not just, they're not looking to get Precious Achiuwa on a switch and take him one-on-one. They're looking to get the opponent at such a disadvantage that they create a wide open three for one of their shooters. And so I think that'll be an extremely interesting part of the game to watch, because look, when Towns is out there, especially when Hartenstein's out there, I think the Knicks will be fine, or relatively fine. When Towns is out there against the small lineups, I think the Knicks are just going to try to outscore the Thunder. But it's those minutes when Towns isn't out there, when the Knicks aren't at their best offensively, and the Thunder arguably are at their best offensively, at least insofar as creating threes, where the Knicks could be at the biggest disadvantage.
Yeah, I agree with you. So to me, I guess how I would summarize my perspective on the matchup is that defensively, the Knicks are going to really struggle. I mean, not defensively. When on offense, the Knicks are going to struggle with the Oklahoma City Thunder's defense. But I don't think their defense, the Knicks defense, will struggle as much as I think some people are worried about. I also am relatively lower on the Oklahoma City Thunder's offense. I think that they're so contingent on SGA being able to get not only penetration, but draw extreme amounts of help, not have a guy stunt at him. That's not sufficient, because their shooters sort of need to just be wide open. And this is something you and I have talked about a lot. Besides Isaiah Joe, who will be hyper aggressive and shoot contested shots, will shoot deep range threes, the rest of those guys are tippy toes on the line. If someone's closing out to them, they are going to pass up that shot and try to attack closeouts, and they don't do it that well. So typically those possessions just end up being reset with fewer seconds on the shot clock. So to me, I think that the Knicks defense will actually be pretty fine in this game. I think that as long as Bridges, who I believe will be on SGA most of the game, and obviously they can go to OG if that's not working out, as long as those guys can hold up well enough, they don't have to shut down SGA. No one's going to shut him down. As long as those guys can hold up and not just require two guys completely dedicated, committed to the ball, I think the Thunder are going to have trouble scoring. So I think this may be a lower scoring game in general, is what I'm coming down to, than I think that other people may believe. But it'll be really interesting to see. This is on record, so we'll see if I'm just completely wrong. But this is what I'm thinking based on watching both of these teams basically every game this season.
It's fascinating how often a Thunder possession you watch and they create this massive advantage and they just don't get a shot. Like I'm not saying a 24-second shot clock violation. What I mean is you're like, okay, surely this shot's going up. And they just keep passing it around because, outside of their big two stars right now, Chet Holmgren's hurt, Jalen Williams and SGA. And then, as you said, Isaiah Joe, the rest of the guys, Cason Wallace, Alex Caruso, Kenrich Williams, these guys really need to be stepping into an open three to shoot comfortably. And so that makes it tough. Like, even if you go small, even if you have all the space in the world, even if you have, an MVP in SGA and a fringe all NBA player in Jalen Williams, who both are capable of creating advantages, it's really hard to consistently create those types of advantages in a game, especially against a team like the Knicks, who are going to be well coached. They're going to be trying really hard. They're not just going to give up on possessions. They're going to make these rotations pretty crisply. And I agree with you. I think it will be a low scoring game. I also think, or I guess I hope, that it'll be a game with a tighter whistle. And I think that will play into it being a low scoring game because both of these defenses like to play physically. Both these point guards are crafty and are going to try to, are going to try to create contact. And it'll be interesting. That side of it will be interesting because if the refs do let the defenses get into these guys, it's going to be even harder for both offenses to score points.
Yeah, I agree with all that for sure. I think I wanted to kind of end at least my part of talking about it is I think there are two keys or a key for each team, and one key for the Thunder, I think, which is sort of obvious, is if Caruso plays. I think Caruso hasn't played in 4 or 5, maybe 6 games or something like that. He's questionable for tonight. If Caruso plays, I think that's a major difference and just gives the Thunder another option to go to. And Caruso really helps anchor their 5 wings and guards lineup just because he's so sturdy down low and his hands are so quick. He can generate steals on any entry passes, on post-ups. He can kind of hold his own. And I think that just makes a big difference in terms of what they're able to go to if Hartenstein is not super effective or it gets in foul trouble or they just need to go to a different look. So I think that matters a lot. Especially the Thunder coming on in off a back-to-back. That's going to really be important to have that guy who hasn't played in several games be able to kind of get out there and go as well. And then for the Knicks side, I think it's going to really come down heavily on Josh Hart. The Thunder are one of these teams that will push to what they determine as your weak link on offense. They will kind of funnel the ball to Josh Hart in a lot of situations and dare him to beat them, not with his passing, but with his shooting, whether it's shooting from 3 or shooting from the mid-range or even floater range. And they will dare him to beat them. And it depends on what Josh Hart's decision-making is going to dictate a lot of what happens on the Knicks offensive end of the court. If he's aggressive and hitting shots, he could push the Thunder out of that kind of scheme. If he's hitting shots but not aggressive, they will just continue to do it. So Josh Hart's going to have to be aggressive because we know he's going to probably play 40 minutes tonight.
Yeah. Diagonal doesn't seem like someone to overly adjust his scheme in game based on like if Josh Hart had a good half. Do you disagree with that?
I think he does. But I think it's just because they have so many options to go to. Like, I think he does it as like a different look, not like oh, you got us. Josh Hart's making every shot. We'll just get out of it now. It's more like, well, we have different things we can go to and we'll go back to it. They play zone sometimes. They'll just zone up. They play this like amoeba zone where they're in a zone and then like midway through the possession, now they're in man. Like they can do almost anything just with the versatility they have of their defenders. So it's almost like you just have so many tools. You might as well use other ones. But I don't think it's going to be like they're worried about Josh Hart just making like 12 threes tonight, but I think they will switch it up if he's having some success or showing like an aggression that we haven't really seen from him a ton this season. Although he did go 4 of 8 recently from 3, which is would be a great sign for the Knicks if that happened.
Yeah. I think my X factor for the game is Towns for the reasons that I alluded to earlier. Just the Thunder are at their best, or at least their ceiling basketball arguably is when they're going small on both ends of the court. It's how they create the most threes. It's when they're creating the most turnovers on defense. And Towns needs to do everything he can to decentivize them from doing that and punish them for doing that, using his size and just getting into the paint as often as possible, creating advantages, scoring for himself, getting kickouts, etc. I don't think that if you're, I think this isn't to say that the Thunder are worse when Hartenstein plays. Of course, that's not true. He brings his own strengths, as Knicks fans know. But I do think that when Hartenstein is on the court, it'll resemble a basketball game that the Knicks are more comfortable with stylistically, and it'll play into the Knicks' hands more in this specific matchup. The Knicks want that. They want to play a game that suits their strengths, whereas if they're playing this small lineup that's swarming, that's making all these quick rotations, and they can't even score over them offensively, they're basically just being thrown into the jungle with, fucking defenders swarming all the time. So I don't think they want that. And I think the X factor there is Towns. On the other side of the ball, this is much lazier than you, but I just think it's going to come down to SGA because he's going to have Bridges, Hart, OG thrown at him. The Knicks are going to do everything they can to stop him, but he is their main advantage creator. And the way to exploit the Knicks defense, the way they like to defend, is to create that advantage. If you're not creating advantages consistently, the Knicks are going to stay home and they're going to make it as hard as possible. They're a really sound defense if advantages aren't being created. But I wouldn't say it's a house of cards because I don't think it's like a bad defensive strategy, but I do think that first card, beating Bridges at the point of attack and getting into the paint, it does cause the whole thing to collapse. So that's on SGA. And if he can do that well, we said earlier that we think this is going to be a low scoring game. I think the Thunder will be able to create a lot of good shots if SGA is at his best tonight.
Yeah, I think that's all right. It's just true. Like, I don't think it's boring. It is just as true. The Thunder will go on offense as SGA goes. And if the Knicks are able to guard him relatively well, like with one player, the Thunder won't score 90 points. Like, that's how their offense is. Like, they go to the iHeart hub, DHO hub stuff, and that doesn't really work that well all the times because their shooters will get sort of open shots and they don't take them. So it doesn't even matter. It does all for them come down to SGA. And I agree with what you said about kind of their small lineup and how they create havoc and sort of the Knicks potentially having more success on the offensive side when Hartenstein is on the court in a weird way. So I think that's it for us for previewing this game. It'll be really exciting and interesting to see how things play out. I think the Knicks can come out of this game looking really good, actually, whether they win or lose, in my opinion. So there's a lot sort of to learn from this game, and really looking forward to finding out. Any last words, Geoff?
And for the Thunder too, like their defense is what's going to win them a championship, I would argue. We talk about, if you talk about a great offense, it's so much easier to frame things this way when it's a great offense. Like you have a top 3 offense in the league, and people are always like, well, do they have the defense do they have a good enough defense to get them over the top or to the championship, to win a championship? The Thunder have this all-time defense, and this is one of their first true tests against an elite offense. And if they show that, hey, we're not just clamping teams like the Wizards and bad teams in the NBA, we can guard these really elite offenses really well as well. I think what that says is the threshold for what they need to be offensively is lower than most would think it is. They don't need to be, an elite offense to pair with this elite defense. They can just ride SGA and J-Dub and score and, put up a fringe top 10 offensive rating, and that will be more than good enough if this defense is as elite as it's been so far.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Thanks for joining us for this episode, and we'll catch you next week.